we are representing the team in Naturvation that have developed different tools for valuing the benefits of nature. And I start by introducing myself. I'm Katarina Hedlund. I'm working at Lund University in Sweden. And Clara?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Clara. I'm working at PBL, that's the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency. And I'm mainly working on ecosystem services in the urban context.
Hey everyone, my name is Sara Maya. I work at the Central European University in Budapest in Hungary. And in Naturvation, I'm mostly working with the social and the cultural assessment of NBS benefits.
Yeah, and we're a large team. We're just a few of those. We should not forget all our colleagues that are not visible on the screen today. But we have been working on how to assess the value benefits of nature, and especially of nature-based solutions in cities. And so I would like to start to ask Clara on how can we actually today assess benefits of nature?
Yes, that's a good question, also a very tricky question or a difficult one. But I think throughout the years in Naturvation, we learned more and more about this. That you cannot answer it with one answer, but it's like more about these plural values and these multiple benefits you have to be aware of. And you can have different perspective in that way on the value of nature. You could, for instance, think more like in economic terms, and I think that was this morning already heard about that you have to, can you put a price on it, or the property value increase when you have more trees around you. But there's a whole other session on this later on. So if you're interested in that, please join that session. But you could also look more in a more environmental perspective. So, for instance, like a street tree can reduce the air temperature during the summer and provide shade to people, or it stores carbon as well as giving habitat to birds. So this is it's a different perspective. So you have multiple benefits, and at the same time, you also I think have to be aware of that. Not all is good. Some people perceive maybe some values as negative. For instance, if I take a pond, for example, some people might like it and see like, oh, it's providing habitat to certain species. It's keeping the water during a heavy rainfall. But at the same time, it might also be dangerous to some people, like especially small kids, if they fall into it. Or it's a room for mosquitoes, and we don't like to have mosquitoes. So you have to be aware of that there are multiple ones, multiple benefits, and there's much more out there. And now I'm heading over to Sarah, but she has, if you want to point onto a different perspective you can have on the benefits.
Yeah, thank you, Clara. And as Clara mentioned, as we also saw today in the first presentation, with very real cases of nature-based solutions and how they are being implemented in cities, we see that there's a very diverse set of impacts, and in order to assess them properly, we actually need to take them all into account. So we started our work in the project by doing literature reviews on what can be the type of social and cultural impacts of nature-based solutions. And with this, we actually developed with another partner, IFL. They developed the cultural part of the project. And of course, we came across the very obvious social cultural impacts like recreation, improvement of health, or creating opportunities for social interaction, like in nature-based solutions. But then there's also the less obvious impacts related maybe with safety that sometimes are not preferred as often, or as our colleagues in IFL noticed, like the protection of natural heritage or cultural diversity, which sometimes is not properly addressed or with enough relevance. Of course, also the educational impacts of such nature-based solutions. When we look at, for example, community gardens, they have quite a big impact on people learning more about nature and its benefits. Such nature-based solutions are even being implemented in schools and universities for the educational value of such elements of nature-based solutions. And of course, all of these social and cultural impacts need to be addressed slightly differently than, for example, the biophysical ones. They are much more context specific, but maybe my colleagues will talk a bit more about that.
So I'm going to ask both of you that when working through these different ways of assessing the values and of benefits of nature, did you find that there's a lot of knowledge, or are there knowledge gaps, and what do we need to learn more to, what are the needs, you think?
Yes, if I start from more the environmental perspective again, we indeed digged into the literature. We looked at the scientific knowledge. Of course, there's much more, but that's where we started. And what we found is that actually we know a lot about parks and trees. But we know less about the small scale or the innovative nature-based solutions. Think about the rain gardens or bioswales, the green roofs, the vertical greening, and there's less knowledge about that. So there could be still a lot of uncertainties, or maybe the knowledge is at the municipalities or at the practitioner side. But yeah, to get an overall view, like for instance, which nature-based solution is best for which situation, you have to know of all, or a broad picture of a broad set of nature-based solutions. You have to know what are the benefits. And we have also discovered that that we know also more about temperature regulation and about recreation, while we know less about, for instance, nature's function to treat waste, like think about cleaning up the water or cleaning up the soil, and also about like pollination. We talk a lot of pollinators, bees, and we like to see them in the city, but we haven't actually measured too much about it. So we don't know yet what is best for them to provide them a habitat. We see lots of examples, but in the scientific literature, it's comparing to the other benefits, it's often not really studied. Maybe Sarah wants to add.
Yeah, looking at the social component, I mean, we found very similar findings. Maybe, for example, for the social impacts, they are usually, I mean, the literature that we checked it, and there's a much more abundance of literature on parks, effects of parks, urban forests, community gardens as well, even some blue areas like riverbank areas, because of course there's a lot of options for social interaction, cohesion, even recreation, improvement of health. And the same was found also for these impacts. So the most commonly found or researched impacts are, again, health, recreation. And again, I think that's also connected with the difficulties in measuring some of these impacts, and the need to use different methods, and much more context-specific research is needed. Yeah. We also found some evidence of some negative impacts, like Clara also mentioned before. But again, for that's so context specific that when you actually need to assess a specific NBS, you need to conduct your own, I guess, research based on whatever knowledge you already found.
So I have a follow-up question here. That when you were talking about, well, we can assess the value of benefits, but then lots of people say, but it will be different if you're in Sweden or if you're in South Africa, because the context is different and the economy is different. And how can we overcome that, and how can we do the assessment even though we know we have different contexts to work in? Can you both comment this from how we work with a more biophysical aspects and the social cultural ones? Clara, can you start?
Yes, the context specific aspect, it's a difficult one, and I think when it comes to the biophysical benefits or environmental benefits, it's much easier to, I think it was said this morning as well. I mean, a tree in Australia will store probably as much carbon as a tree in Paris. So in that way, you can transfer the benefits from one side to the other side. But for more the social culture, I guess it will be much more different to bring that in. Although we still have to, I think we would like to find a general realization, so that and maybe sometimes you have to be aware that you cannot bring in always the context, but then it's maybe up to, if you work on a broader level, up to the people who really want to get used to it, to go back to the community or back to the area and check, how is it working for my area? How can I add on? And what we're now currently also doing together, with you, Katharina, that we're trying to find values for whole Europe. And of course, then we're putting Helsinki in the same pot as Madrid, but it might help to get an awareness of it. Like even though there are differences in the countries, but have a first general view maybe, and then from there you can work on and make it much more context specific. But that might also need different tools.
So, just to add that, the literature that we checked, that we studied, most of it is Europe focused and North American focused. We also found some evidence that, for example, benefits of, for example, parks that we found in cities. Like, for example, in summer months, people go to parks because, yeah, it's cooler and you can relax. In countries like the Philippines, the effect is not the same, just because the temperature is much higher and humidity, and you have all these factors to check. So when you, for the social and cultural context, again, like I mentioned, doing more case-specific research, like using case studies, using questionnaires, actually methods that allow to collect or to gather like the people's perceptions of these topics. Yeah, then it's much more needed than, I guess, a more straightforward biophysical assessment of impacts.
Okay. So I think we can move to our second part of our expert talk today. And Clara?
I think there's a question coming up, right?
Yeah, we just got one question from the public.
All right, we do the questions first. Yeah.
Should we? Okay. If there, and actually this question maybe leads to the topic that we want to discuss. So the question from, I think, Dave, he mentioned if there are any simple ways of assessing or presenting the values of nature-based solutions. Maybe this is a good way, Katarina, to introduce the UNN, maybe?
Yeah, all right. So we have in the project tried to overcome the local context-specific details and then working out a tool to do a general valuing of benefits and across globe, and not really caring about where they are assessed, because we have a relative scale of the benefits. So if you enter our navigator tool, which is in the comment place, Sarah, right?
Mm-hmm. And
also in the hives of the assessment, you can find a way into the tool. And there we have worked out a way of how to match different challenges you will meet with the nature-based solutions, and to then what type of nature-based solutions you're using. So I can try to share the screen to show you a bit how you can do this quickly. And so we have this navigator tool where we have a very easy kind of bronze level where you can examine the value of nature-based solutions. And then you can meet different urban challenges and get help with different indicators of the values. So let's say you want to work out the value of a park, but we have defined 12 different challenges that we would like to meet. And here we could say that, yes, of course, we would like to see what good the park can do, and if it can meet challenges for having more green space and increased biodiversity, and you can tick in the health and well-being. And then you come into the assessment scheme where we use a set of indicators that then will indicate the benefits. And we have more biophysical ones. You can see that the park area will deal with air pollution. So it can measure it can reduce the particulate matter in the air, which is quite detrimental to our health otherwise. We can also have an indicator of life satisfactions, or of how we feel about living in the neighborhood, and whether these parks can actually cool the atmosphere. And in this way, we made a kind of an index of different values that have been measured in the literature, and then you can test out the ways to see how multiple values or whatever type of nature-based solution you would like to test towards a challenge. And if they are better for all of them, that will be maybe a better choice for when you want to implement them. Are there more questions here?
Yeah, at the moment we are having quite some questions. Maybe I can start bringing some of them.
Yeah.
Just a second.
And anyway, so in this tool, it is you can find all the scientific evidence. It's all described for those who want to scrutinize all our indicators in detail. And it's also meant to be a kind of a a very rough general view of the value of nature-based solutions in cities.
And I think to add there, maybe it gives you an overview also, like how to assess it, like about which method you could use or which tools are available. And we looked especially in open access tools, so that everyone can do it. So you can also see it as a library of available assessment tools. So click around and you might find some stuff you need for your work as well. And also different kind of indicators. So there is not one bullet indicator, but you have different ways of measuring and different ways of maybe it depends on to which people you're talking or which perspective you want to address. So
yeah. And I think I can see from the questions coming in that there are questions on how to use assessment and planning, and are really planners using our indicators and our system. And we can't yet decide how many of them are using our system, but this type of indicators are commonly used. There are hundreds and thousands in our reviews. It is a flurry of indicators that are all over the world and used for this. So we try to attempt to showcase some of the ones that are very common, and there's lots of scientific evidence around. So that's our selection of these indicators. But I think we will, before our time runs out today, we're also going to talk about how to use these assessment methods in the planning process. And we have also in our tool highlighted ways of doing this. And I think this is, Sarah can describe a bit of how this can be done.
Sure. So as we know, citizens have much to contribute to these decisions about implementing and design of nature-based solutions. And in order to try to help this process, also in the Urban Nature Navigator, we have a section where we also provide suggestions of methods and tools that can be used for this type of collaborative planning. And also active participation. How can citizens be involved in the planning from the beginning and also at different stages of the development? It doesn't mean that the stakeholders can only be consulted once. So if you go to the Urban Nature Navigator under the silver level, which, as Katarina mentioned, is the level that actually involves this stakeholder participation, you'll find all different types of methods. Each method has a description of which stakeholders should be consulted or can be consulted, what are the methods, what can be the outputs of such work. I cannot see now the page itself, but I put the link on. And I put the link also on the chat so people can consult it. So we know that citizen engagement is crucial for the successful design of nature-based solutions, because if stakeholders are not being consulted, who knows if the actual output of the nature-based solution will be effective and if people will actually have the benefits that are needed, and if these are recognized. You put it. So depending on the objective of the assessment, as you see, we have 4 different objectives. By clicking, if you can just maybe click on one, Katarina. The users of the tool, you will see what type of methods. As you see, there's 3 methods here. And we also have suggestions for further reading. Also, our colleagues at EFL developed this citizen engagement handbook, which is very useful and has much more detailed, even examples of how these methods can be implemented, and of further reading. So that's also an important publication, I think, an important output from the project. And it was developed, I think, by Anya and Katrin at IFL.
And we have to say that we are not kind of pushing on one type of indicator or assessment system, but trying to make a roadmap on how to assess benefits of nature. And then you can use the tool to find further links. You could use your own indicators, and you could develop very local specific ones, as we've done in the gold level, where you need map data. And so let's say if we click on the climate challenges, so then there's a set of indicators that you can use, and then there's different types of ways of how you can model and assess the values of these, but these are not on average, these are local context specific. So and I think in the stakeholder process, I think the silver level guide, both these different methods of how to involve the stakeholders and what types of assessment you can do, they are crucial to make it relevant for the stakeholders. So
Yeah, thank you, Katerina. One question that was mentioned, what type of publications we have within the project to assess and value the benefits of nature-based solutions. So in Naturvation website, you will find both the tool, of course, that we are describing now. There's also, if I'm not mistaken, a database of methods that we developed early on in the project. It's a very long list of what, maybe Clara, you can talk a bit about these. Like it's basically a database of methods, right?
Yeah, that's a gold level in that tool where you find, an overview of different modeling tools. What I said earlier, open access tools. So that can be helpful as well. And of course, we have also the reports. I'm not sure if they're in the Naturvation website of these different reviews that we have done to get an overview of the knowledge availability. But there are surely coming up also publications which are still in the review process.
Yeah, and we also intend to we also have all the indicators we've gone through in the research work, the review work will be publicly available as indicator libraries with the publications. So our aim is to do everything open access, and everything, all the maps we do of assessment will be open access. We just have to finish them first. Yeah. So this is an ongoing process.
I think there was also a question about if we think that these tools are used by the planners and municipalities, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the idea of this Navigate and also about this library of tools is more like a guidance how you could assess this. I'm not sure if the tool, sometimes you need like quite some specific expertise, and so I'm not sure how far it can be applied easily to working, for instance, the municipality, but often the municipality have even much more detailed tools they're working with. But you might have find some tools which you haven't thought about, or just the idea of how the tool works could help you maybe to further develop your own tools or your own method. So you can also take it an inspiration, source of inspiration, or see what's out there. But it's for sure not complete. And I think we also have started from a scientific perspective here. So we have looked like which tools we find in the scientific literature, at least when it comes to the modeling part. So there's much more out there.
We have a few more questions on the indicators that we selected for the UNN. So Sander, for example, asks whether we make a distinction between indicators that can be applied without expert knowledge or without tools. I mean, our tool, I think, is the way the results are showcased on the website. People cannot really select indicators, but the indicators themselves already provide or already show what is the contribution of that specific indicator for the NBS type that we are studying, right, Katerina?
Yeah, so I think on the bronze level you can apply you can choose the indicators. You don't have to have an expert knowledge. It will give a value between 1 and 5. But in the gold level, you need expert knowledge to do map and have GIS data to really to model out how these values would be maybe distributed across the whole city. So, but if you're in a city planner, then you would have a contact or consultancies that can do this work. So we meant to give advice and inspiration to all different levels of the assessment. And I think if we, in combination with the Urban Nature Atlas that defines all these different types of nature-based solutions, I think also our Navigator is a way of inspiring and looking at cases where this is done. And we will, while we are building the different levels in the tool, we will also showcase examples of what we've done. So these can work as examples. They are still not there, but they will come very soon.
Work in progress.
So should we go to the last question? We have roughly 5 minutes left, I think.
Yeah, I would like to ask about, for you, Katarina and Clara, what you consider to be mostly the takeaways from the UNN, how it can be used, and Katarina, maybe you can go first.
Yeah, I think the takeaways for working with the assessment is that it really has to be stakeholder relevant. It needs to be co-produced when you do it, because we can do scientific assessment methods and indicators on very technical levels, but if they are not used, they are not useful. So I think that's one of the main messages from this. But what also have struck me as a key thing is that when we've looked at evidence of values, it doesn't vary so much across the world, actually. So we are more similar than we think sometimes. Yeah. So Clara, do you have any reflections on this?
Yeah, I think my reflection would be like, first of all, when I also started like doing this assessment of nature-based solution, it was completely new for me. But having this, and that comes back what I said earlier, this having this multifunctionality in your mind, so that makes it, of course, also more tricky to assess something, because you cannot do like one-to-one, but you have to get the whole. You try to get the whole set of it, and also that you. What I encounter with my work, that a lot of work was focused on what can nature do, but of course it's also about, okay, what people want. So putting the demand side, and especially if you're working in an urban context, going back to the people, do they want to have a tree and why? So, or what do they want? Do they want to have like I don't know, want to have a colorful, colorful with flowers garden, then it's something you have to find ways to show like what are these more than one benefit, and also maybe they are not interested in a tree in front of the garden, something like that. So looking like what people really want and what the benefits they are looking for, and then I think with these tools we're working a lot with, I can help with showing what the benefits could be. But of course, it's up to them if they want them.
Yeah, and I think that also another takeaway from this is I see a question here on talking how will these benefits change due to climate change, and I think one of the takeaways that I think we could bring from our work is that yes, benefits may change, they may even increase, but we will also mitigate climate change by some of these nature-based solutions. So it can work both ways. And I think that this is the key thing when we try to do planning, that we actually think of the multiple positive benefits that we can get out of these, that we can both use them to adapt to climate change, but we can also mitigate climate change from the implementation of them. And
Sarah, what is your takeaway? So sorry, Katarina.
Yeah, no.
I was just like, we have a few minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, you both already mentioned, I guess, the most important things. I would just, again, reinforce the idea that not when someone is doing an assessment, not to focus on one particular issue. The beauty of nature-based solutions, and it's the diverse set of benefits and impacts that you can have from such interventions. So yeah, to focus on that, and also to make sure that when people are designing nature-based solutions, and again when they are being evaluated, that all people are being heard, so that not just to do a simple, straightforward, I guess, assessment, but actually to hear people's opinions and how that knowledge can be implemented in future projects.
Yes, and I also would like to say that one a takeaway from the work with assessing benefits from nature is that it's really important to identify the scales you're working on and in what detail you want to assess, and that needs different stakeholder initiatives. It needs sometimes the whole the citizen involvements, and sometimes it needs experts by the planning offices, and sometimes it needs more the NGOs working on, and as Clara said, the demands of this. And through the work here, when we will be working, we really learned a lot from the different perspectives that we have in our group, in our assessment team. I think all from socio-economic knowledge, economic knowledge, and the more natural science knowledge. So I think just by merging ourselves into one kind of communication unit, I hope that our work will be also easier to understand for others, that representing all these different aspects. And I really learned a lot also, I think, from the co-production with the stakeholders. I think that's the key thing. And we have been we have been revising and revising and revising our tools according to comments and trying to explain what we do as much as possible. And we are happy to continue that process even after finishing it, because we can still revise and inform and do this. So
just to add that we are at the very end of our time, and there's still quite some questions. So if people want to go, I think in the Hive, it's correct term, right? Me and Katarina will be there, I guess, and we can answer a few more questions.
Yes. And then we can also ask about, we can also answer more technical questions if you want to test our navigator that you can see in the Hive.
Yeah, thank you everyone for all the questions.
Yeah. So I think our time is out.
Yes.
Yeah. So bye then, everyone, and thank you for listening to our discussion. We have enjoyed this. Sorry I can't see all of you on the other side, but I hope this can lead us all to work with and implement more nature-based solutions in the future. Right. Bye then.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.